Welcome to the Ascension Alchemist podcast. This is your host, Michael Abramson, and this is my episode where I'm very excited to bring forth what I feel is my deepest passion to work with men. And really what many have seen is to bring the leaders, the way showers, the change makers, because I know right now there is a element of leadership that is needed for this planet. And I really feel when you really look at leadership, I ask each and every one of you, where does leadership start with? Where does it begin? Because I know within myself what I've learned for now almost 50 years, coming soon, that leadership starts with self-mastery. And one of the things I love with working in men is remembering that leadership doesn't always begin with what we interpret as influence, authority, or being followed. But leadership begins so much before anyone is actually watching us. Because what I've noticed, leadership begins in those unseen moments, in how a man speaks to himself, how he responds to a trigger, or even his responsibility to his inner state. I'm sure many of you that are listening, when we think of the word leadership, sometimes we look outwardly versus, well, how can I take lead of my thoughts? How can I take lead of my emotions? How can I take lead of my inner state? Because sometimes they're leading me. How many times have you noticed, especially in these heavy, dense, chaotic days that we're seeing, where sometimes the outward leadership seems to be just quite chaotic as we look outward. Yet the true leadership, I feel, is when it comes to mastering what's within us. Because really, when I look at leadership, it really begins with how we take control within us. As we know, so within and so without. And so today, I'd like to explore leadership really begins with self-mastery. And when we talk about self-mastery, you may ask yourself, well, what is self-mastery? Because it's not exactly where we're trying to control or we're trying to bring forth this level of dominance, but more so bringing awareness. In this journey of becoming a conscious, evolved man, which I'm so excited to launch tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, for our dear sacred men nationwide, globally, that awareness starts with the thoughts, the emotions, and the patterns and triggers that come up. Have you ever noticed when something happens, how much control you have over yourself? It's taken me many years, many decades to really understand this mastery of taking lead of thoughts and emotions that somehow had dictatorship over me. For I remember many times when I would get angry, this frustration would envelop me and I would project, and for some reason it would just hover over me like a black cloud. You ever felt those times where you feel upset and somehow the emotions are leading you versus trying to move through the storm? And it may take a day, it may take a week, depending how serious it is. It could take a long time. Yet, to define true leadership is to define how you can master yourself in some of the hardest and strongest storms. Because I know when it comes to self-mastery, it's starting to learn in leadership that you can control your emotions. You can control your thoughts. You can actually control your ability to respond versus react. Yet many of us men weren't taught that growing up. Many of us were not given that responsibility, that ability to respond and when a situation comes forward. And that's why I find it so important to bring this topic up, because when we start to bring forth the leadership of our own inner ability, then we start to magnetize and bring forth the greater leadership that we are here as divine men to show and take charge of what this world is forming into. This inner leader starts with our own connection, that own divine intelligence within ourselves. Because really that is the true leader. And when we start to separate from that, then we create that separation of who our natural, energetic frequency, true nature is. And then once we separate that, we start to actually give power to these emotions and thoughts, and they're actually leading us. So just imagine it comes back to aligning yourself and giving yourself the ability just to bring a greater sense of awareness in how you choose and how you acknowledge what is happening inside of you in real time, recognizing each and every aspect of yourself, because that's what I really look at self-mastery. Starting to just turn the awareness on. It's like turning a light on into a dark room where the shadows can no longer hide. So as you bring awareness and consciousness to those areas that may have been old behaviors, patterns, reactions, even maybe that untamed emotional state that most of us men never learn how to control, we start to take leadership in our self-mastery that transforms us in what do I believe many of us are here to be the greatest version of yourself. And many people hear, what does it mean to be the greatest version of yourself? It means to be that successful, abundant, thriving state that you were born to be. When we look at any level of nature, it thrives automatically. When we look at life in general, it wants to thrive in an abundant way, just like us men and women and animals and beings. We are here to thrive and to succeed. And so when we do that, we operate in our highest and greatest joy, which I believe most people want to feel because it feels phenomenal. And that's why I always state becoming the greatest version of yourself is that conscious evolved man. And I believe that takes true leadership. But what does this leadership involve? It involves our responsibility and our actions. It requires our communication of not only what we're expressing outward, but inward. It requires our accountability to see how we can own some of the areas where we may not have been unconscious. But most important, it requires a level of devotion. Devotion to truth, devotion to integrity, devotion to living in alignment with that higher alignment, our God-given level. And when we do that, our natural leadership shines through us. Yet, it is a discipline. It is a discipline. And I'm sure everyone that is listening, we have those thoughts. We have those emotions. We have those times where it gets challenging because no longer is the healthy voice speaking, but that other victim or self-sabotager or Mr. Judger or Mr. Ungrateful tries to lead us into another version. I call that sometimes the human body versus the divine body, because in our divine essence, we see the natural given leader within us. But sometimes the human side still working itself through the limitations, which is all right, or the victimhood, which is all right, or the lack or limitation, which is all right. But what happens when we start to pull the reins on the bull, and we start to move into our greatest leadership, recognizing that in self-mastery, it brings that leadership into our relationships. That calm presence and reaction, and that self-mastery, that leadership comes within fatherhood, where we're modeling an emotional maturity. Even in that self-mastery and how it brings that leadership in work, where we're clear, grounded, decisive. And in brotherhood, when we men come together, how that self-mastery becomes that transformation where we can trust, follow presence, and not worry about what we're performing, but more like what we're being. Because isn't it about right now how we can choose to lead within ourselves so we can live the happiest, joyful, prosperous life? Because no one's going to do that for you. Only you are going to do that for yourself. And in that self-mastery, this is where the rubber hits the road. The opportunity where it gives just the reflection of where each of us are on our conscious evolution. All of us at unique levels, exactly where we are. And as we take each step forward, claiming that leadership of how I choose to react, how I choose to respond, how I choose to treat my most sacred friends and family. And as a man, how I choose to show up in the world requires that inner leader, that inner divinity that we know is already within us, because that's where we came from. That infinite intelligence behind our heart beat, that beats infinite until our creation is shifted to another. That infinite intelligence behind our eyes that keeps blinking, that allows our autonomic nervous system. This leadership that I'm talking about is not only a muscle to practice, it's our ability to shine our greatest gifts that I feel the world needs right now. For in the men's circle, what's so amazing, when men come together, there is this remembrance. There's this remembrance of the common bond that when we connect as a brotherhood, we start to feel the confidence, the courage, and the strength to walk away from these circles as leaders, because all of a sudden there is that remembrance of what we can do when we were reminded of the abilities that are already here to put forward. And all it takes is an action of, I see you, I respect you, I honor you, and I believe you have the ability to do it, just by other brothers supporting one another in their presence. And that's what brings so much passion and so much joy to presenting these wonderful circles that now have evolved into a conscious, evolved men's gathering event that I bring forth, because I know right now it becomes a lived experience. This is not just a lecture, or it's not just a facilitation. It's a time where we come together, we center together, and we feel this space where we can grow, expand, and evolve. And to me, right now, this world, I believe, needs conscious leaders that take accountability, take responsibility, live in their respect and honor of every single being on this planet. Animals, plants, human beings, every organism, so that we can step into our true nature of kindness and respect. And we start dissolving all of this separation, distraction. For what I see is the world, it does not need to change because men talk about leadership. It changes when men become the embodiment of it. And that's where I feel right now many men are being caught. Many women are nudging those that see that sacredness within them to step forward and into action. Because what I've seen about leadership and what I've seen about self-mastery is this. When we step into action, not only do we eliminate and dissolve fear, we start to move forward in the dreams and desires that we've planted within us. And we start to move in ways that influence others just by being a model of it. And what happens right now? What happens right now to all the men, to everyone that is listening? That leadership begins the moment when we choose to master ourselves and not be better than others, but to be integral to what our soul is calling us to do and what we're here to share and what we're here and to live into this path of conscious evolved men, to live in a place that we know we're here to evolve, to expand, to grow, and to show what this world that we are co-creating with our dear sacred feminine, with our dear sacred masculine, and as a divine union with that inner child as that presence of innocence to create the greatest change we've ever seen, which starts with leadership in that ability to fully awaken to your highest and greatest good. That's why I feel leadership begins with self-mastery. Because how can we lead? How can we be a pure representation of what we're here to do as men if we're not leading ourselves? And with no disrespect to any of the leaders that we're seeing now or any that we've seen in the past, it comes to this present moment of what we choose to demonstrate, because at this very moment, we have a choice how to lead ourselves. And then in that moment, we can then make that proclamation of what we envision and what we see and want as future leaders. So now it's not based upon political. It's not based upon sex. It's not based upon agenda. It's not based upon all of this divisional program condition that's been rooted in such a depth. It becomes in thy own leadership within. And that comes into the alignment, into the embodiment of your God-given purpose. And that may sound a lot, or that may just sound so exciting that it gives you the permission to say, wow, I always knew I was a born leader. Yet maybe I did not know where the first step was. Well, what happens if you're listening right now and you know you're meant to be a leader? You know you're meant to step forward. Yet it becomes now of that first step into awareness, that first step into self-mastery of just starting to become aware of what thoughts you're thinking of, and if they're benefiting you or not. And if they're negative, are they really true? Because they may be coming from trauma. Maybe in becoming a leader, that first step is starting to see how I can move through an emotional situation, that those emotions are not leading me, and I have the ability to transform a trigger just by recognizing it's an unhealed pain that's helping me move forward. What happens if I start to understand I become a leader when I hold a state of frequency so high that I become untouchable, so that anything on the outside is actually just gnats or flies moving by, and they don't have an influence or impact? Because the true leadership is your true empowerment within yourself. And I truly feel that empowerment is that alignment and embodiment of your divine nature. And that's the gift, because that divine nature is already here. So imagine it's just a matter of aligning physical, mental, emotional, and a spiritual. And then your true leadership takes forth, because then you're operating in your highest and greatest health, wealth, and embodiment. And when I say wealth, your wealth of joy, your wealth of happiness, your wealth of creation, not just monetary, but the wealth of everything around you. So that leadership starts to show that we are here to live an abundant, prosperous, natural state of living, because that is our inherent divine right. Our inherent divine right is to have our health and our state of well-being in every moment when we give that attention and focus to. So as we step back and we look at who is the true leader, that is yourself, because you lead yourself every moment. You lead yourself in your thoughts, you lead yourself in your emotions, you lead yourself in your actions, and now it becomes who is behind the switchboard. Because you have that decision and you have that choice. And many of us have forgotten, because there's that default mode where we may give it to an outside influence, an outside distraction. We may give it to the news, to the media, to the weather. We may give it to anything outside of us, but the true leader is within. And now it becomes the responsibility of the self-mastery that is already given to you when we just apply our conscious awareness. And that's what I get excited for, because I know as I bring the men together, it's like lighting the candles of light so that the leaders can walk forward and take ownership of what they're here to do at this moment. And as we come together and we sharpen our swords for that peace, for that unity, we then make that into the fullness of what we plan to do when we ignite as great men, as conscious, evolved masculine that are here to make the greatest change on this earth, which just starts within ourselves of becoming that true destined leader. And so for those that are listening, and when you hear this, it will be Thursday, January 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Men, I invite you to a monthly free gathering. I'm tithing this, giving it back, because I know as we gather, there's going to be great expansion from it, and respect and honor, and the ability to share the wisdom that I'm so excited and passionate to bring. And for those women that have husbands, that have brothers, that have sons that could be felt and know how beneficial it will be, please email me at info@ascensionalchemist.com, the RSVP. To please remember that as we support our sacred masculine, we're supporting the rise of the sacred divine feminine. Because as sacred divine masculine and sacred divine feminine that come together, we know that this unity consciousness is what is evolving to make this world what we see as the greatest place to be and live in that harmony, just as we live in harmony within ourselves, that our breath, our heart, and our autonomic nervous system demonstrates in leading our body. So does that choice offer when we choose to take those steps to lead ourselves each and every day. Because it becomes what I feel our natural given right to take leadership of what we know and what we're destined to do. And to me, that's the greatest gift that can be given not only to yourself, but to every man, every person that can see you as a model, as an example, that becomes the ripple effect in opening up the doors of consciousness and transforming and dissolving of what we see outdated leadership, because there hasn't been the full mastery of the self in the consciousness that is here to expand and grow. And those that know that they're listening, they know. They know that it's within them, and they know that power is, even if it's taking leadership in your own career, in your own relationship, in your own ability. And that's not control, superiority, domination. This is taking leadership of allowing what I feel in my heart is to let that lead the way. Your heart, your love, your consciousness versus the ego, the mind, or any old consciousness that brings distraction, diversion, or division through our actions. True leaders know it's about the integrity of the heart and bringing our consciousness together. And that's what I'm so excited to share today. And I feel that those that are listening can also recognize within themselves that growing element is expanding and evolving. And now it just becomes that joy of diving into self-mastery. And that's why Honey and I are so excited, because we have these courses of looking at our limited beliefs, really focusing on how the emotion is connected to the thought, the feeling that emerges out of a trigger, which is related to a wound. And once we start clearing that and releasing that, it opens up space for our greater divine purpose to shine through, because as we clear the old, we welcome the new. Self-transformation is the greatest gift that you can give, because that becomes your own mastery. And I've learned, especially in this year, that the more I start to master my thoughts, the more I start to master my mind, the more I start to master my emotions, that divine leader within me rises to help and serve in levels that I never knew was possible. Because now it's the leader of the divinity that's walking forward, and not the leader of the human mind that was trying to control the situation. That becomes a whole new reality when our divine nature is leading us through the way, and our human body is fully embodying that true nature, so that we live in that alignment where we naturally flow, evolve in everything that we do. And if you've ever witnessed and seen what happens when we live in that state of complete flow, abundance, joy, prosperity, happiness, and love are the seeds of fruit that naturally come through it. So take this moment to remember there is a divine leader within you, each and every one of us, that heartbeat, that love, that connection within, that breath that brings you to each moment. And now, through your ability in that self-mastery of how you choose to live each day, creates that leadership that is here to walk the walk instead of talk the talk. Because that's what we're here to do as conscious evolved men. We're here to show a whole new level of leadership, an ability to rise beyond what we're seeing now, so we can anchor heaven upon earth and bring forth the greatest, most immaculate change that this world has ever seen. And that's where I want to thank each and every one of you listening. Thank you, brothers, for coming together. Thank you, sisters, for supporting our brothers. And thank you, just that vision where you can see that men are being supported to raise to their greatest version, that are helping the rise, assisting that sacred divine feminine, moving into the greatest versions that's within each and every one of us, so that we understand and feel and know what is before us. And like I said, what is before us is the creation from the leadership that we're placing in our self-mastery. That starts right now. So thank you, each and every one of you, for listening. I'm so excited to bring forth this into monthly online Zoom events with conscious evolved men. Again, for those men that are listening now, those women that would like to send their men out, please email us at info@ascensionalchemists.com, because I know right now it's becoming a redefining of what leadership is. And that's where I feel, as conscious evolved men come together, we're redefining it together. We're coming together as a group, and we're bringing forth that self-mastery to remember what wants to be brought forward. And what's being brought forward is the greatest gift you can offer, being the greatest version of yourself. So thank you all for listening, taking the time, sharing this with men that you know would really help them, especially those that may be stuck, those that may be challenged, because I know what's coming through me is a signal that activates others to connect to their divine nature. And that starts with being the leader of yourself, mastering yourself, and allowing that leader to guide the way. Once and for all, thanks you, and wishing you all a most beautiful, blessed day.